Welcome back to Beyond the Park. My name's Adam Yaris, and today we're going to be looking at Parks and Recreation Season 1, Episode 5, The Banquet. And this is, I personally think, one of the most intriguing episodes of the early seasons here, because it kind of sets up a few things for the near future. Now, it starts off with this great cold open of Leslie Knope telling us all about the local Wamapoke Indians and how they had killed a man named Nathaniel Bixby years earlier. Turns out they were angry because Nathaniel Bixby traded them a baby for what now turned out to be almost all of Indiana. Huge issue. Anyway, we move back beyond all of this and move into our episode. And this episode is all about Marlene, Leslie Knope's mom, receiving an award from the local town council, and how basically only people are going to be going to this because she terrifies them. This is not an award for great people. This is an award for, honestly, people that have done horrible things and have I can't talk today, much like I'm getting a stage fright of this. This is an award for people that have blackmailed others to eventually get to this high-powered spot. Now, Leslie here is preparing her speech, and Tom is helping her throughout this process. Now, Tom has a way he feels about Marlene and actually says some insulting things in here that I am not able to repeat on this podcast. So Leslie is going, she's prepping, she's doing all of these things, and she gets ready to go over for this big event. So she goes to this local barber named Salvatore, who's going to become a somewhat routine person on there, and asks for a haircut called the Mayor. Now, of course, the issue with this is the Mayor is a man's haircut. Leslie ends up turning up to this party looking like a person that's a little bit different than who she normally is. And of course, she has brought Anne, her BFF, who apparently looks like they're on a date together. It's an awkward scenario for this group of people because this is not what they're intending. Anyway, they end up going to the banquet together. They're having a blast. The party is raging. The food is good. Ron is going to talk about the food and how it's some of the best things in the world here. But anyway, it's Pawnee's best and brightest, and then we meet this person, Janine Restrepo. Now, apparently Janine Restrepo is the person to know. See, Janine Restrepo controls zoning in Pawnee, and Leslie needs Janine on her side to get the park in the pit rezoned so that one day she could actually build that park. So now Leslie's entire night is about buttering up one Janine Restrepo. Fun name to say. So anyway, Leslie gives her speech at the party, and apparently she does it all just to butter up Janine Restrepo. Goes entirely towards that scenario. Tom gets up, says all insulting things, basically flirts with Marlene the entire time, and of course Ron even gives his speech. Now, Ron does something very different. He says he refuses to flirt or butter her up, but instead gives only straight facts, which I like. Now, in the middle of all of this, the life goes on. Mark and Tom end up going out to the club to meet some ladies. In the meantime, Anne gets frustrated with Leslie and runs on home because Leslie's making a poor life choice. See, Marlene gives Leslie some blackmail to get Janine to actually help her. See, Janine Restrepo had blown off Leslie, saying, one day we'll get in contact. Marlene says, no way, not to my daughter, and tells Leslie that Janine Restrepo's husband had been caught drinking and driving a little while ago. So Leslie attempts to blackmail her, and Janine rejects it hard. And Leslie realizes that's not the type of person she wants to be. So she goes home and apologizes to Anne. And things start working out better. That's a brief summary of all that happened here in Beyond the Park on this episode. Now, of course, there is a key line, and I know in all of this, my boy, Ron Swanson, brings some of the fire, but this is perhaps one of his most iconic lines. In it, he is at the party, he had just gotten through a tray of food, and this is what he had to say. Check this out. He says this: I enjoy government functions like I enjoy getting kicked in the nuggets with one steel-toed boot. But this hotel always serves bacon wrapped shrimp. That's my number one favorite food, wrapped around my number 3 favorite food. I'd go to a banquet in honor of those Somali pirates if they served bacon wrapped shrimp. Talk about extreme right there. That's how much Ron loves this bacon wrapped shrimp. Anyway, that's easily the best line of the episode, although there are so many quotable lines on this. Next thing that we had going on here are some quick observations, just 2 in this. First, we already mentioned Salvatore. He is Ron's barber in the future, he's Leslie's here already, and he's just this background figure throughout this series, but he's always there when important things happen. Second thing that we learned Tom is married. Now, this is a surprise to everybody throughout the whole series that Tom, although he's flirting with all these people, actually is married. But we'll find out more about that later on and what that actually means. But now, let's take a moment and move beyond the park. So, the thing that comes out to me in this episode is it centers along this big classic question. Does the means justify the end? Now, what's that mean? It means, does the end result, the end product of what we want, does that mean that whatever we do to get there, is it actually okay? Now, let's break it down. In this episode, Leslie has a good end goal, right? Her end goal is to help build a park that's going to better the community, better the lives of those around them. The end goal is really good. That's not the problem. The question is the means, how she goes about doing it. See, Leslie normally has great character, great integrity, but here she's taking a step down for a moment. She's attempting to blackmail this person and use unfair processes to get to that end result. See, the end is good, but the means aren't good. And throughout this episode, we see Leslie struggling again and again about whether or not she actually is doing the right thing, until she realizes she wants to get the park, but she wants to do it in the right way. The means have to justify the ends, and the end have to do not justify the means. They have to work together. And that's what takes us beyond the park today. Now, the reality is we know that the end product here, the park, never justifies how we go about doing something, even if the end result is really good. What's important is when we're trying to get somewhere, we need to have the right processes to get to the right end. And the reality is the way that when we do things matters so much, because how we do them will actually affect the end result. We see this all the time where people make mistakes, and while they might get the right thing ends up hurting at the end because they went about it in the wrong way. You know, as we're talking about going deeper into deeper parts of our lives, into spirituality, into God and all these things, one of the things that we constantly see reaffirmed is about how we do something matters so much. Now, there's a great guy named Eugene Peterson, and he called it that there's a congruence in our life, that who we say we are on the inside matches our outer side, that how we go about doing things is just about as important as the result itself. So the question is, how do we go about doing things? Well, one of the great things that we could do is listen to God's word, where he says that we can have the fruit of the Spirit. Now, the fruit of the Spirit is basically evidence that God's living inside of us. Now, this is super cool because when we have this fruit of the Spirit, and if you've said kind of yes to following Jesus, this is already starting to develop. It might be quick, might be slow, might be super fast, somewhere around there. It's getting there. But these are the signs that God is helping us do things that are not only are right, but in the right way. And the fruit of the Spirit are kind of simple. They're love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And when those things are working in our lives, we find out that how we go about doing things is just as important as the end result. You see, we can't do things just to get something done. It's all about how we do it, because that vindicates and makes right the end product. Just like Leslie realized in this episode, that if she goes to only try to do something so she could get this end result, no matter what she does, if it's not done right, she's going to regret it. And that takes us beyond the park today, because how we live, how we do these things matters so much for our character, for our integrity, and in the process of following God too. Well, that takes us beyond the park. Thank you so much for joining us for Season 1, Episode 5, The Banquet. Now we're going to be gearing up for the season finale in our next podcast. See you soon.